Ministers have made ever bolder pledges about cutting carbon emissions across the economy as they race to meet the legally binding target of net zero by 2050. Finally, they're having to get down to the details of how they'll actually do it with a wide-ranging green print for the transport sector. In a preview published earlier this week, they insisted the proposals in the Transport Decarbonisation Plan are not about stopping people doing things, but will nonetheless require huge changes to people's behaviour. How on earth does that work? Although there was no mention of how the plans will be paid for, of course not, there is understood to be a lively debate on the topic within government. Senior government figures suggested that one answer being actively considered is the introduction of a network of new toll charges in roads across the country, helping to make up for fuel duty that will be lost as drivers shift to electric cars. Dubbed a green print to decarbonise the UK's seas, skies, roads and railways, the proposals were still being finalised earlier this week. Duncan Simpson is from the Taxpayers Alliance and joins me now. Hi, Duncan.
Good afternoon.
There you go. You've got a problem. The answer, tax it.
Well, it kind of depends on how the government is doing this. I mean, as you say, this green print, which didn't really say too much on road pricing, specifically alludes to potentially introducing this in years to come, so there isn't a hard plan to do this. Now, bear in mind that fuel duty, when this was introduced in, I think, 1993, a big part of the rationale was for environmental reasons. So the concern about introducing road pricing, from our perspective at least, is that the government may consider this as sort of a way to replace both fuel duty and vehicle excise duty, whereas the existing regime on taxation for driving is actually an explicit sort of environmental tax. So the economics make some sense. There are externalities with a lot of people driving around busy roads at school time and commuting and so forth. So in terms of the rationale of introducing that tax, the economics is not illogical, but it depends entirely on delivery. And ultimately, with so many other plans which the government has for investing in the bus networks, for example, carrying on with HS2, the outlays on transport are going to be enormous. So we'd be very, very nervous about the Treasury just seeing this as a new cash cow simply to replace fuel duty and VED, which will necessarily decline as we move to electric vehicles.
Would you imagine road tolls to be less fair than taxation on fuel?
Well, it depends. So fuel duty has been in place. It's had a freeze for about 10 years. So you pay about 58 pence per litre of petrol or diesel. And vehicle excise duty is levied on a variety of factors, depending on how green the car is. If you've got a hybrid, for example, you pay slightly less VED. If you've got a huge gas guzzler, a Range Rover, or whatever else, you're going to be paying quite a bit more. So there's already kind of disaggregation in how that's implemented. Obviously, you've got a big car, you've got more cash, so you're going to be paying more tax in the first place. I think with road tolling, it will again kind of depend on how people respond to that. So, for example, would it mean that you may still have to do the school run, but rather than going to work immediately thereafter, you'll slightly delay the journey rather than going on the motorway, or you're sort of a B road. So it depends on how consumers actually respond to that. But yes, I would imagine it's certainly the case that a lot of people poorer people will be punished by this. If you look at the data, actually, the sort of the lowest earners in the country are much more likely to be making use of their car to get to either to work or general routines, general journeys, which have to happen through the course of life, compared to the richest people. Again, the richest people in this country make much more use of train travel compared to the poorest. And of course, train travel is already hugely subsidised with government grants. Indeed, obviously with the coronavirus situation, but the rail network was effectively nationalised across the UK. So there's already a lot of different rationales for people to use the transport network, but it could well be the case that road pricing will be particularly punitive for the poorest.
Well, we're looking here at a potential shortfall, aren't we, Duncan, of £30 billion in fuel duties when people ultimately go electric. How can we make up that shortfall? Do we have to?
Well, indeed, that's a huge question. I mean, on the basis of what the Prime Minister was saying this morning with his Build Back Better plan, which frankly didn't really lay out much in the way of a plan. I mean, frankly, I find it a little bit concerning. But obviously, the government is sort of charging ahead with huge outlays in infrastructure projects, even though the financial situation in this country is quite obviously substantially worse. The national debt is well in excess of £2 trillion now. It's about the same size as the economy. We've got huge increases in pensions. Potentially, the state pension is increasing by 8% next financial year, which seems flies in the face of good evidence and fairness, I think, in this country. So on the spending side, certainly the government could trim quite a few other areas. So as welcome as it is that the government has maintained a freeze on fuel duty for the last 10 years, and yes, the forecast for fuel duty sees it sort of increasing gradually over the next few years. The government needs to get real with people and say, well, actually, quite a few of the spending projects which we've committed to in the last couple of years just don't look realistic anymore.
Fascinating stuff, Duncan. I hope we speak again soon. Duncan Simpson is the research director of the Taxpayers Alliance.